Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Mark Savoie, founder and co-owner of Nurses Direct, a family-owned business that provides nursing facilities services directly to healthcare facilities in the state of Louisiana. In fact, they were one of the first nurse staffing agencies in Louisiana. They staff hospitals, at-home private duty locations, and other healthcare facilities with nurses who provide a high quality of patient care. Their mission is to provide staffing services in a way that is tailored to the needs of each client, and to do so in a manner that is personal, courteous, and professional. You can find their website at nursesdirect.us. Now, Mark himself worked in radio for 18 years with his own on-air show, and in 1979 became a licensed practical nurse and a respiratory therapist. We will hear about how hardship and necessity led him to start his first nursing agency in the 80s, and get to hear about what that has grown into today. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in extra cash flow by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now back to our guest today, the founder and co-owner of Nurses Direct, Mark Savoie. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Oh, look, thank you, and I appreciate you inviting me.
So before we get into the origin story of Nurses Direct, tell us in your own words, what does Nurses Direct do?
Like you said in the intro, I mean, we staff hospitals. I first started off just doing in-home nursing care. That one, when I first started the business, I wasn't staffing hospitals or anything like that. Because the in-home, what we call private duty nursing care, you get a group of nurses that just stay in there. The business is more consistent because you're going to need that nurse again tomorrow. So we did it for people who otherwise would be in a hospital or a nursing home. We would put we'd turn their house into a hospital or a nursing home. And, it's very expensive, but some people had insurance to cover it. If you don't have insurance, to cover something like that, most people won't do it. I mean, it's not the cost of so much from my business, but it's just the cost, what the nurses cost, to do that type of care and everything. But, a lot of people towards the end of their life, if you're going to die, most people want to die at home. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I hate to say it and be morbid about it like that, but that's reality.
And when you first started it, was that type of in-home care unusual?
Not really. It wasn't like it is today. I mean, you see advertising today from, several companies, to care for mom at home or, help them get dressed in the morning or whatever. It was there, but it wasn't as much as it is today.
Gotcha.
A lot of people didn't even know they had that benefit in their insurance package.
Right. Yeah. Less common back then.
Yeah.
Less well known. And so what sets Nurses Direct apart from others in the space?
Well, number one, I've been doing it for 40-something years. And it's not just about the money to me. It's about providing a good service to the facilities that we staff and the patients that we care for. And like I tell everybody, look, there's a lot of ways to make money fast, and there are companies out there, and I'm not like there are companies just as good as mine or better. So I'm not gonna, say my company is the best by any means, but there's a lot of ways to make a quick dollar, and I don't want the quick dollar. I like to take my business, grow it slow, do it right. I'm gonna make mistakes in life. We all do. I can fix an honest mistake. I can't fix a lie. Mm-hmm. So that I think that, I'm not going to cross the line to do something illegal, unethical, or, I'm just not going to do it. My staff knows that. My business partner knows that. Not that he would either, but I will not cross the line for a dollar.
You're not in it for a quick buck. You're in it for the relationship and to do things the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back prior to the origin of Nurses Direct. Tell me a little bit about your 18-year radio career. How did that all come about?
When I got into radio, I just that was kind of woke up one night. I don't know. I was probably 17 years old, and our local radio station was signing off the air. And for some reason, I said, "Man, that sounds like a good job. I want to get in the radio." So the next day, I went and applied at the radio station, and the manager and the owner of the radio station said, "Look, you need to practice reading because your reading is not the best." So he says, "Go home and practice. Just read anything. Read the newspaper." He said, "But put a pencil in your mouth, bite on it, and talk." And he says it's going to make you enunciate your words more clearly. And so I did that for 2 weeks religiously, and I went back and did another, did another reading, and I was hired. And from there, I just fell in love with radio. The only reason I got out of it was the money is just, it's not going to support a family of 5 kids that I have now, again, it's not for the money, but a lot of people think these radio announcers make a lot of money. If you got a syndicated program, absolutely, you're going to make good money. But trust me, my program was syndicated in about a 30-mile radius. That's about it.
And what kind of a program was it? Were you playing music? Was it a talk show?
We had a mixed format. We had talk show. We played a variety of music. We played country. We played French because South Louisiana has what we call Cajun music. So on certain nights, there would be Cajun music. I tried to stay off of those nights because I can't speak French. But every once in a while, I was stuck doing a French program and not talking English, and play the French music. So certain times of the day we'd play country. Then, at 3:00 in the afternoon, we'd go to American Top 40. And then at night we'd go to country, so it was a mixed format. And it really wasn't that bad. And then eventually the radio station went all country.
All country.
Yeah.
So if I were to listen to radio stations in South Louisiana today, am I finding any that are focusing on French, broadcasting in French?
You can find some. Yeah, not many, but you will find a few. And if they're not, I don't think you find one doing all the broadcasting in French, but they'll have some segments in there for the French-speaking people. The Cajun language is dying. Another generation, it'll be gone. It's not the same French as, from France or something like that. And my mom tried to teach me French when I was about 30 years old, and I said, "Mom, it's a little late." And our parents spoke French and didn't want to teach their children because they didn't want us to know what they were talking about. So they never taught us French, and then they realized the error of their ways. And I tried to start taking French from my mom, and I had 5 years of Spanish. So what was end up happening, I was speaking half the sentence in French and half in Spanish. I just couldn't master it, So I told Mom, let's give up on the French teaching. So that was it,
I can relate to that. My father was born in southern Italy, and same kind of thing. Like him and his parents, that was sort of like their secret language. They could talk about how rotten the kids were being without us understanding it.
Yeah, that was it, and then they realized, there's very few people today around here that speak Cajun French, and they tried to, and they still have some programs, what they call the French immersion. My daughter went through it for 6 years, where in school, half the classes were taught in French and the other half was taught in English. And you could go all the way up through the 12th grade doing it. And she did, but when you take it in school and you're not using it every day in the public, you just, you lose it. It's not gonna be fluent to you.
So, Mark, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the financial hardship that led you to first starting a nursing agency.
That was fun. I'd opened up a children's clothing store called Bare Necessities. I wanted to, do something on my own. I was working at the radio station and I was working at the hospital. And then I opened
Because
up.
by this point you had become an LPN and
Yes,
a respiratory therapist. Okay.
yes. And what happened? The children's clothing store didn't make it. So when
Mm.
I shut down, I still owed the bank I think 60-something thousand dollars. And everybody said, go ahead and declare bankruptcy, yada yada yada. I said, look, I'm not declaring bankruptcy. I said I borrowed the money, I owe it. So I went to the bank. I paid off shut it down, had enough money to pay off all my small creditors, but I had that big note looming at the bank. So I told the bank, I said, look, just turn it into a house note. So they turned it into a 30-year house note, 558.50 a month. I remember that number so well. And after about 3 years, I said, man, I got to do this for 27 more years. This is
Mm.
not going to be fun. So one night I was working ICU, and there was a nurse from the Philippines, and she was actually an agency nurse, and saying how much money she made. She had opened up her own agency, and I said, man, I just need to make 160,000 to pay off that debt. So when she finally realized that I was trying to, I guess, provide more information about her business, she just clammed up. So anyway, I opened up a nursing agency, and praying it was going to work. And a year later, after about the first year, didn't make any money. It was just getting started. I didn't have any business. It was promoting the business. And then one of the nurses I worked with at the hospital called me and said, Mark, you still have your nursing agency? I said, yeah. She goes, well, I have 2 patients that need round the clock nursing care. She goes, are you interested? Because the insurance company don't want the family to handle it anymore. They want an agency to take over. So we got those first 2 cases, and they were retired school teachers. So just on those 2 cases, I would say a year later, I went to the bank and wrote them a check for $160,000,
Wow.
and I paid
So
off the debt.
So let's back up a little bit because I want to go to the bankruptcy part of this.
Okay.
First of all, to talk about the stress that this puts you through, right? You're married at this point. Do you have kids?
Yes, I had 2 kids at that time.
2 kids at that point. So you're working 2 jobs. You're at the radio station. You're at the hospital as an LPN and a respiratory therapist.
Yes.
And you tried to start this business. It was unsuccessful. Now you've got this huge debt looming over your head. The easy button in that case is to declare bankruptcy.
Just what they were telling me.
Pretty quickly wipe that debt out.
Right.
I think it says a lot about your character that you were like, nope, I owe that money. I made a commitment to pay that back. I'm not going to hide under the protection of the bankruptcy, and I'm going to do whatever I can to pay it back. I mean, what was that thought process?
It would have bothered me more if I would have declared bankruptcy and walked away from that debt. Even though, they say you have to wait 7 years and then your record's clean again. I think just the fact knowing I took advantage of somebody because, the money I borrowed from that bank, that was somebody's money. It wasn't the bank's money. It was somebody's money. And I mean, the bank had a business, but I just couldn't bear that I was going to do that to somebody because I owed it. I mean, we all take on responsibilities and, just like I teach my kids, live up to them. We all make mistakes, fix them and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And thank God I did, because had I not had that debt, I wouldn't be talking to you today about a nursing agency. Because I wanted to go to school to be an attorney. And so I was in college at the same time that I had the 3 jobs, basically. The radio station, the clothing store I opened up, and the hospital, and I was going to college. And my initial goal was to pay off the debt and then go on to law school. And the business did so well. I said, why do I want to be a lawyer? And just, I stuck with it, and here I am today.
So you got some information from this one nurse that was also working at the hospital that had her own agency.
Right.
So it gave you a little bit of idea, maybe how the industry worked, maybe that there was an opportunity there. But at some point, she clams up.
Yes.
You decide you're going to start this business. I mean, I have to imagine you don't really know what you're doing when you first get started, do you?
No, I went in business with an attorney. Biggest mistake of my life, but one of the biggest, because I knew there was going to be a lot of contracts and things to do. And not to mention, I knew that just financing, paying the nurses was a big issue. I mean, he didn't put up the money. We both went to the bank. We signed a note, but we never had to borrow any money. I mean, despite what I say about the attorney, he was an excellent business person. He did manage money well. And, to this day, very few times I had to borrow money from the bank to finance my business. Um, Today is a little different. We pay a lot of our nurses daily. So if people
Mm-hmm.
want to realize the cost, I have a lot of people, Mark, I can open up my own nursing agency. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I'm not stopping you. More the merrier. Um, when you paying, a registered nurse $35, $40 an hour, they work in 12 hours. You got 10 nurses working. Imagine you payroll the next day, and that's just every day, and you don't get paid for 30, 60, 90 days down the road. So you got a lot to float in payroll, not to mention your office staff and everything else. So, I always said I could never work on commission. And I realized I've been working on commission for 40 something years because I own the business. I'm the last one paid, me and Mike are. And, but it's worked out well. We manage our money good. We grow in, I think, 7 states right now. Um, I really couldn't tell you every state we're in. I know we're in, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, um, those three win 7. During COVID, I think we win 15. COVID shot us up like, oh my God, it was scary how many nurses they need and what they were willing to pay. Um, and that helped get this business going a lot faster. Now, of course, a lot of that business backed off from when COVID went away, but we did maintain some relationships and we're still staffing some of those facilities in other states today.
So you mentioned that going into business with that attorney was a huge mistake. There were some good things that he did. He was a good businessman. He, I don't know, helped with the contracts, maybe helped with the bank.
Yeah, the bad thing, one day he came after, we were successful. And I mean, we wasn't making, a whole lot of money, but I was living pretty good. And he came to my house one night and, probably sat on my couch and propped his foot up on another chair. And he goes, Mark, I'm an attorney and you're just a nurse. And I think I should make more money than you. I laughed. I thought he was joking, and I said, and then when I realized he wasn't joking, then I said, this is a nursing agency. I'm a nurse. You're not. You're an attorney. But he was real arrogant in that sense that because he had the law degree, he should make more money than me. And that got us into a big tussle, and we ended up splitting up.
Mm. So did you end up having to take a loan from the bank to get started or not?
No.
No. Okay. And I mean, were you just pulling money from your own pockets to
From
be
my
able to
pockets,
float
because when I first started, I didn't have, we just had 2 patients. And back then I was paying them weekly. So I still worked at the hospital and the nursing and the radio station. And that check would go to help finance my nursing business because my wife's a registered nurse. So, we lived off her check. We didn't have any house note or anything like that. We were very fortunate. My wife's family gave us a house. So I never had a house note or anything like that. So I could use my check to help finance the payroll. And as the business started slowly growing, I just wouldn't take out the money. I'd leave it in the business to be able to float the business. And, a lot of people, what people don't realize, most people don't fail. People who fail in business, they usually fail within the first 5 years, and they don't fail because they don't have any business. They fail because they have too much business and don't know how to handle it. And I think that's why I went into business with the attorney in the beginning, because I didn't have that knowledge, and if I would have had the opportunity, to bring home $250,000 a year, I'd spend it. Back then, instead of leaving it in the business, hey, I'm working hard, I want the money, and he didn't allow that. And I'm grateful today for that. I really am.
You kind of learned some discipline early on that
Absolutely
has helped you down the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at what point did, and I should mention that your partner, like Darby, we had on the podcast here a few weeks back. And so once folks are done listening to this interview with Mark, I highly recommend that they go back and listen, get just a different perspective, different kind of personality. But how was it that the two of you first met?
That's weird. My stepfather was a barber, and he was cutting Mike Darby's grandfather's hair, on a regular basis. And they would talk, and uh, Mike's grandfather said he had his grandson was a nurse, and my stepdad said, "Well, my son's a nurse." He said they need to get together, and that went on for a few months. And finally, Mike and I met. I went and meet him, and I asked Mike. I said, how would you like to come into business in a nursing agency? And Mike said, no, I really don't. I worked agency before. I said, no, I don't want you to work as a nurse. I want you to come into business and help manage it. It's a different, you know, position. And, I said, look, he goes, well, I have my lawn care business as a side business. So Mike was working full time as a nurse and had a lawn care business. I said, well, the big difference is you have to be there to go cut all those people's grass. I said, you can't cut grass in Peoria, Illinois. I said, you're just not going to do it. So I said, where the nursing agency, a lot of our work is done, as far as the recruiting of the nurses and everything is done online. So they very seldom walk into your door. Half the nurses, more than half, I probably never meet. And so I told Mike, I said, you'll come on as a regional director and you'll be paid a straight commission. And, I told him all the numbers and everything. And he said, yeah, I'll try it. I said, look, you have nothing to lose. I'm not asking you for any money. I'll put up all the money. If it don't work, you lose nothing but your time. And Mike, took the position, and that's history. I mean, he started getting some business, and I helped him. I gave him some business in the beginning that would otherwise have been the companies, but I wanted Mike to get some business to entice him. And once
Give him a
Mike
little momentum.
yeah, once he tasted the success of it, he stuck with it, and here we are today. And Mike was not an owner then, but eventually, we brought him in as an owner, and we split up with other companies, and now it's just me and Mike. And we said, we don't need any more partners. Mike and I, and look, we have our up and downs. Mike, has differences, but I know exactly how Mike is going to do something in a certain situation, and he knows what I'm going to do. So we know each other well, and that's because we think a lot alike as far as the business goes. So we, sometimes I'll say do something and Mike don't want to do it, and he ended up being right, and vice versa. So we work well together. We don't, if we have a problem, we talk it out. Sometimes it's yelling, but hey, we eventually work it out. And that's why we're still here today.
Well, and if both of you kind of have the same or similar, North Star, that you're trying to get to the same place, and
Right.
that's the same value system. Sometimes in some relationships, a little bit of that friction is helpful because
Yeah, it is.
it's like, I've got an idea. No, I've got an idea. And okay, let's rub together and let's figure out where the best idea is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what was behind the initial decision to invite Mike in as a partner? Obviously, he's
His
an employee.
drive.
He's doing well.
His drive. He would. Mike was very hungry in the sense of he went out, got the business, found new business, and he hustled. And he knew it was this business is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Mike never complained about it, because when we first started off, we didn't have all the technology we have today. We had pagers on the side. We didn't have cell phones, So if your pager went off, you had to stop somewhere if you were on the road and find a payphone somewhere and make a call, And Mike never complained. He just did the work, and I think that was a big part that what I saw in him. I said, no, he needs to be an owner.
Well, good on you to have that vision. Because, I mean, it's very natural for us to sort of want to hold on to and protect what's ours, what we started,
Right.
This was mine. But to be able to have, I'm going to use the word generosity. I think that's part of it. But I mean, obviously, it's not just you doing it for charity. You saw it's a strategic thing. He can
Yeah.
be a great partner. We're aligned. I can incentivize him even more. And the business is going to grow more as a result of bringing him in.
Yeah, and it took some of the work off my back. I didn't have to be the only one bringing in business now.
Yeah.
So with Mike there, Mike would bring in business, he would handle it. The company would grow. I'd benefit from it. I knew that. And Mike would benefit. So I didn't have to do all the work. When I was business with the attorney, um, at night we had to take call, after 5 o'clock. Like I said, if a nurse called in, they had somebody, they called the answering service. And if one of our nurses didn't show up, we had to find another nurse. And the attorney you know, just said, "Oh, well, I can't find one." And he'd make me do it. You'll find a nurse, Mark. And so I taught him a lesson one day. I remember it was a Friday and he was on call. And he goes, "Well, I'm going out and eat with my wife. We're going, we have a dinner reservation." And right then the phone rang and a nurse was calling in. I said, "Well, you on call, handle it." He said, "No, you handle it." I said, "Well, you're on call." So, we're kind of arguing. I said, "Stay right there." So I called the nurse, another nurse that would take the call-in position. I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll pay you $100 an hour if you go in." She goes, "I'll do it." Hung up the phone. The attorney went ballistic. I said, "Hey, you wanted me to take the call? I wasn't going to waste my time. Yeah, we losing some money, but hey, I got the shift covered." And yeah, so he learned real fast. Don't push it on me again. And I wasn't doing it just to be ugly. I mean, I needed a nurse, and I knew $100 an hour for an LPN would guarantee that nurse would go to work.
Yeah. Right. Well, two birds, one stone, it sounds
Yes.
like. And so when Mike first joined, what year was this?
As a regional director, it's sometimes I guess the early '90s or so, somewhere around maybe late '90s, somewhere around there.
Okay, because you made the point that, oh, hey, you can't cut lawns in Peoria, Illinois.
Right.
So that says to me that even in the early 90s, you had moved outside of just Louisiana for where you were doing staffing. Is that right?
It was still mostly Louisiana, but it could have been New Orleans, North Louisiana. I mean, it was just all over the state, where a lot of nursing agencies or home health agencies are usually tied with the government to a 50-mile radius. They can't handle business outside 50 miles. But since we don't deal with Medicare and Medicaid, we're not under those guidelines. So we could go out further than that 50-mile radius. And so that, helped grow our business, where if you were a licensed home health agency and did a lot of Medicare or Medicaid and got paid by the government, you were contained to that 50-mile radius.
Why is that? Why is there that kind of limitation in
I
place?
think they just want to make sure that you're close enough to be able to handle the work, because it's hard, like New Orleans, from where we are right now, is 150 miles from us. So sometimes it's hard to find a nurse when you don't have a local office there, and I think the government just wants to make sure that the home health agencies don't try to take on more than, eat more than they can chew, so to speak.
Yeah. So how do you go about, if your base is in Southern Louisiana, how do you go about finding nurses in right now 7 different states? At one point during COVID, it was 15
Yeah,
different
we
states.
just advertise, and
Okay.
we have the internet site. Um, we'll also try and find key nurses from, let's say, give you like Biloxi, Mississippi. I may bring in that nurse and pay that nurse a little bit more, but that nurse works with other nurses so they can find nurses for us. So it's kind of a network thing we do. I'll pay them a little bit more, but they'll help me recruit the nurses.
And this is the strategy that you've used to
Yeah.
grow into all these different locations.
Yeah.
Now, was this something you sort of strategy you stumbled upon? Did you try different things that didn't
No,
work?
I just knew I couldn't do it all. In the beginning, it was always me. Even if I hired somebody in the office like a staffing director, if they had a problem, they call me, and many times I've gotten calls on, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning or Christmas Day or whatever. And I said, man, I just can't keep doing this all by myself. So that's when I came up with the idea of regional director. I said, look, I'll bring them on, give them a percentage of the business, not ownership, but pay them a percentage of the profits. They'll work a lot harder. And then they know they have to staff either the hospital or take care of the private duty nurse, or because if they don't make money, they're not getting paid, because I
Mm.
wasn't paying them a salary. They work strictly on commission, so they tend to work a little bit harder.
So each of these new geographies you go into, one of the first things that you have to do is make sure you've got a good regional director there.
It helps.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the first thing, because if you don't, I'm fighting every other agency. and we're all battling for the same nurse. There's like all the nurses that work for our company for Nurses Direct. Well, they may be signed on to 4 or 5 other nursing agencies at the same time. So we're all. What happens is that a hospital call and say, look, I have an ER shift tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I need an ER nurse. Well, they're not just going to call me. They're going to call all 5 nursing agencies, however many they have. And then the first agency to call back that staffs it gets the shift. Now, there are a few hospitals that we do have what we call priority shift staffing, where they'll give me 24 hours advance notice over the other agencies because I've treated them well over the years. I sent them good nurses and I've taken care of my business. So they'll call me first and give me 24 hours advance notice. And if I can't staff it, then they'll blast it out to the other nursing agencies.
Okay, so you've got a hospital who's contacting 5 different nurse staffing agencies with the same opening.
Right.
And those 5 nurse staffing agencies may have some of the same nurses that they're contacting.
Yep.
And so what's the secret to Nurses Direct getting that nurse to agree to your placement to that location rather than one of your competitors?
Sometimes I'll make less money because it's funny you ask that. A lot of times they'll have 2 phones and you hear, because we'll call at the same time, for the ones that we don't have that priority shift staffing. And they'll say, well, Nurses Direct, how much you paying for this shift? Hold on. Advantage. How much you paying for this shift? Okay. So I'll ask them, what Advantage offered you, And they offer me this an hour. Okay, I'll give you $1 an hour more. Okay, done. Yeah, it's crazy. But, and like I tell the hospitals, I said, if you have 5 car dealerships and they're all selling Mercedes-Benz, what's going to happen? I mean, if they all give good service, you're going to go buy that Mercedes-Benz or Toyota, whatever it is, whoever's going to give you the best price. Okay. With nursing agencies, it's completely opposite. The more agencies you allow in, the higher that cost goes. Because now, like I said, you got nurses knowing that, they work for several agencies and they can drive up the costs just by saying, hey, Advantage will pay me this, how much you pay. And I'm not going to lose that shift. So sometimes I'll pay exactly what we're billing and I'll lose money, but I get that shift staff. So I just build a better report. Oh, well, Nurses Direct, y'all much faster than ABC agency and get the shift staff. So then they'll call us first. Sometimes they can give me a 5-minute head start and that's enough.
So on the nurses side, why do they choose to work with an agency like yours or multiple agencies like yours rather than establishing like a full-time job with one of these hospitals?
The biggest advantage, they can work where they want to work. They work when they want to work. They do get paid more money. They're not in the politics of working and being an employee of that hospital where they have to work, a set schedule or something like that. This way they can work at, 5, 6, 7 different hospitals. And when they don't want to work, they'll slip back and say, no, I'm not interested. I'm taking a few weeks off or something. And so that's the biggest reason. And as far as the hospital side, the hospitals use us because their census fluctuates during the wintertime, during COVID, like, instances like that. Their census shoots up real high. Well, they need the nurses, but when their census goes back down, if these nurses were their actual employees, they still have that payroll. So then they have to start what we call flexing the nurse. And so, you stay home today. Well, they don't get paid. You flex them enough, then they say, okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to work. I need to make money, so I'm going to work where I get paid and I got a guaranteed income. So that's the biggest thing for hospitals. It's not a fixed cost of their payroll. When they don't, it's a love-hate relationship with us. They love us when they need us, but when they don't, they hate us. And they think it's us that's driving up the cost. And it's not really us. It's the nurse. We treat our nurses as employees. Some agencies treat them as independent contractors, which there are some issues about that. The IRS and the Department of Labor says that a nurse cannot be an independent contractor because they're guided, they're told what to do. And, if you read all the guidelines, what an employee and an independent contractor is, it's just, like I said, they're just not part of their payroll, and it helps them financially, even though they may use it for 10 years, because they all want to get rid of nursing agencies. So a lot of hospitals will build up what they call their float pool. So they'll pay them the same thing we're paying them as a float nurse. In other words, we'll call you only when we need you. But that's only one hospital. So what happens, that nurse may only work 1 or 2 times a month there. Whereas if they work for an agency, we have several different hospitals we can send them to work so they can still pay their bills.
So you don't really see it as a threat to your business model?
Not at all.
No.
Not at
When
all.
your nurses go into, different hospitals, is there any sort of a culture clash? Are they seen as outsiders? Are they,
Some of them are, and in the beginning they are, because the hospital nurses, employees know they're making more money. So a lot of times they'll give them the worst patients, the hardest patients, more patients than the other nurses have that are employees of the hospital. But once they get to know the nurse, they kind of back off and they treat them as one of their own. Because I mean, some of our nurses will work at a hospital that's been there 4 or 5 years as an agency nurse, and they become one of theirs. You don't even know they're an agency nurse.
And so you made the point that, you really treat your nurses as employees, whereas, some of the others are treating them as independent contractors. And so what benefits does that afford the employee? How does that show up differently for them?
Well, for the nursing agency and the hospital, they get to charge less and pay the nurse more because I have all their FICA. I have to match their Social Security, all their taxes I have to take out and pay. So what an independent contractor agency, they can charge the hospital less money because they don't have all those tax consequences and liabilities we have, and pay the nurse a little bit more than we're paying them, again, because they don't have all those liabilities. If they work, 12 hours and they're making $50 an hour, it's easy to calculate their payroll, and you just write them a check. And then what ends up happening is at the end of the year, these nurses, a majority of them didn't save for taxes, and they get popped. You're making some good money now as an agency nurse, and you didn't put away money for your taxes.
Because you're not having the payroll withholdings, taken out to help you sort of budget that. You're responsible for doing that on your own, and most employees aren't accustomed to that.
Yeah, and they're not. So they get a big, they'll get a $30,000 or $20,000 tax bill at the end of the year, and they go, I can't pay that. I said, well, if you work for us, we would pay that for you. They lose, roughly about 8% by working as an independent contractor, even though they pay them more. And, they don't pay them that much more. They only may pay $1 an hour more than what we pay them as the independent contractors. But they're losing that matching. They have to pay all of their own Social Security, all their, everything themselves. So actually, they're not getting paid more. And I mean, I've showed many nurses on paper, look, this is what they're paying you, and this is what we're paying you. Even though it looks like we're paying you less, we're not, because look at the percent you got to add on at the end of the year to pay your taxes.
Yeah.
And they have to go through a full year to realize it, because they just think I'm misleading them or, whatever. But at the end of the year, they realize I'm not working as an independent contractor again. And not, some of them do save, and they'll learn the budget and put money aside to pay their taxes.
Now, you made the point with your clients, with the hospital facilities that you work with, that with some of those you have a preferred agreement with them. You've taken good care of them, so they come to you first. They give you, a 24-hour window to fill that position. Tell me what it looks like for you to take care of a customer. Like, what are you doing better that the other companies didn't do to make them want to give you this preferred status?
Probably one of the biggest things was two things. Number one, sending them a good qualified nurse. And number two, I make sure that we staff them as fast as we can. Because, usually it's a floor manager or unit supervisor that's calling us, for the need that they have. And a lot of times, if the nursing agency doesn't fulfill that need, that unit manager may have to work that shift. And they're usually salaried, so they don't get paid any extra money. My wife was in that position. She was the head of labor and delivery. And a lot of times, back then it was real hard to find nursing agency nurses that worked labor and delivery. My wife was the unit manager and working 70, 80 hours a week. I said, baby, you're making half of what the nurses working underneath you are, and I taught her real fast. I showed her real fast. So when she resigned, her check went up, because number one, I mean, she was making at one point like $3, $4 an hour. I said, this is ridiculous. So you can call yourself the boss. It's not worth it.
Right. So what do growth plans look like for Nurses Direct?
It's looking good. We're getting some contracts with some major hospital facilities that are nationwide, and it's harder to get into these big facilities just because they are real stringent. I mean, we don't just send any nurse to a hospital and they, okay, this hospital called, go to work. Once a nurse is, before we staff a hospital, that nurse goes through a screening process from that hospital, to see all their credentials, make sure everything's legit, their nursing license valid, they CPR certified, and all the credentials that they say they have, they actually have. They'll interview that nurse. Then they'll go through orientation to learn that facility, how they do business, so to speak, how they care for a patient, their charting system and everything. So that could be anywhere, from 3 to 5 days of orientation that nurse has to go before she's able to work RE at that hospital. So it's not a matter of just picking up the phone and sending in any nurse. I wish it was that easy. In the earlier days, it kind of was, but now with all the, rules and regulations and everything out there in Louisiana now, you used to not have to be licensed by Louisiana to be a temp staffing agency. Now you have to go through go through the state, meet their requirements, and now we're licensed by the state of Louisiana.
So you mentioned some of these bigger national hospital systems being more stringent, more difficult to get into. What does that process look like for you?
It's very hard because they have a lot of nursing agencies already staffing them, and why would they pick us? Because the other facilities aren't meeting their needs. That's the only reason.
That's what it comes down to.
Yes, and so we really strive on, once a nurse is able to work at that facility and we get a call and we have a need, we make sure that we staff that shift as fast as we can. And then we'll talk to the hospital. After that nurse has worked a couple of shifts for them, they'll say, oh, look, we really like that nurse. Well, instead of you calling me every day, why don't you put them on like a 13-week contract? So we'll put them on a contract, and that way they don't have to call us every day. And it's good for all of us. It's good for the nurse. It's good for us. And it's good for the facility because now they're guaranteed, 36 hours a week or whatever that contract says, and they work just like their own employee. They're on a schedule. And again, the nurse will work it because they only tied that facility for, 6, 8, 13 weeks at the most.
Mark, one of the questions I like to ask business owners is running a business, right? You got to keep your eye on the bottom line, profit and loss.
Yes,
You're not running a charity, right? You got to make sure that you're turning a profit. And as business owners, we've got sort of two giant levers. I'll just put them into sort of these two buckets. One is how do I increase sales? The other one is how do I decrease expenses?
Right.
As you think about your career, are there any creative things that you've done to pull either one of those levers in a certain direction?
I'm sure I have. I just can't think of any right off.
No, I put you on the spot.
I mean, I had to because it's just we're all the same. And again, I think it just goes back to having a good staff in-house that can get our nurses and not because we spend a lot of money when we look at a nurse to come and work for us. We have to have a background check. We have to do drug screens. We have to check all their credentials, and all of that is not free. So we've learned over the years, I guess, what to do first, because if a nurse comes back, if we call a nurse for, okay, we're setting up a drug screen for you for Wednesday, oh, I can't make it then. Okay, well then let me look. Okay, I got one for you the next Monday. Oh, I can't make it. Or then they'll make it. they'll say they'll take it, and then that day or the day before the drug screen, they'll call in. There's a reason they're calling in and not going to that drug screen because they're taking
So you
something.
make the drug screening at the front end of the process so you can weed them out more quickly.
Yeah,
You
if
don't
you're not
have
going to the
do
drug
the other
screen, I don't
expensive
need you.
stuff.
Then you're not going to do it, because the first thing that's going to happen if hospital is missing narcotics or any type of medication, any nurse that day working on that floor, they will be drug screened immediately.
Mhm.
And look, I'm not saying every nurse is taking drugs, okay? But if you keep refusing to take a drug screen, there's a reason. So I just say, look, pass on that nurse. Let's move on to someone who's going to
What are
get the
some other
drug
red
screen.
flags that you see that you look
Yes.
out for?
So,
What are
we've
some of
learned
those?
over the years to look at little things like that. You come back with a bad background check. Well, what's a bad background check? Okay, she has 4 speeding tickets or whatever. Um, Look, we all make mistakes. Some people just like to drive with a heavy foot. But if you have elder abuse, child abuse, or something like that, now that's off. You're not working for us. Because a lot of times we'll send nurses in nursing homes too. And if you have a charge for elder abuse, I send you into a nursing home, and then all of a sudden something happens to that patient. Even though it's not our nurse that did it, we're going to be looked at
Yeah.
very, very closely.
Mhm.
So we won't even take that risk.
No. Mark, what's particular challenge, personal or professional, that you've gone through, overcome, lessons learned coming through the other side?
Getting married at a very young age.
What do you mean by very young?
My wife was 15. I was 18. Yes, it was one of those things. She got pregnant and we did get married. And we're going on 48 years next July. And we're still
Okay.
married. We have 5 children, 3 grandchildren. She went to college. I went to college. We both went to school. Um, it was hard, doing that, because in the beginning, she wasn't a nurse. She was going to nursing school. I was working I was a nurse a few years before her. So I was working as a nurse and working at the radio station. So I had to constantly work 2 jobs. And it's not fun. I mean, I'm not the only one in the world that does that. And so I made sure that while she went to nursing school, that I pulled all the overtime I could, because I knew in the 3 years that it took her to finish that nursing degree, she'd make a lot more money, and it would change our financial situation. She actually wanted to be a veterinarian, and for some reason that didn't work out. So she told the nursing instructor, she said, well, if I can't take care of the 4-legged animals, I guess I'll take care of the 2-legged animals. And she became a nurse. And my wife is a
Right.
very good nurse, and she's actually working in the company now. My wife and Mike's wife, we brought them in the company because if something happens to Mike or myself, that they own, they're owners as well. So I wanted them to know the business. So in the event when something happens to us, they can just keep on and go on with the business. They don't have to
So they're
worry.
involved in the corporate side. They're
Yes, they
not.
are. They making
Yeah.
decisions.
Because I think with your
They-
wife early on, she was a nurse that you were using to staff at client locations.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But now both your wife and Mike's wife, they're involved in the corporate side of things.
Yeah. And Mike's wife is a teacher, and she's very good at what she does. She comes in, she's doing the business side, and so as a teacher, she was very structured. So I think she helped structure us a lot more, just in house, and done a great job. And then my wife being a nurse, we can tell, because I'm a nurse, Mike's a nurse, my wife's a nurse, my directors are nurses like Kyle Menord and stuff. So when we tell a nurse, look, go to this hospital, it's not that bad. We know, because we are nurses. We've been there. We know exactly what they have to do. If you never worked as a nurse, it's kind of hard to tell somebody how it's going to be at that facility when you never worked it, or you don't know what nursing is about. So, I think that gives us a little benefit over the others.
So kind of going back to this challenge, your wife and you got married very young.
Right.
Your parents as teenagers, right?
Yep.
You're working / going to school / working 2 jobs. I mean, you've got a lot going on at a very young age. makes you either like fall apart or grow it quickly?
Well, when you're young, you can do it. I couldn't do it today. I'm 65 years old today. When you're young, you have that drive and you have that ambition and you have the energy. Today, the drive is there. I just don't have the energy anymore. So, that's why I hire a lot of people. We have a big staff here, and I can do any job this staff does in house. It may take me a little bit longer, but Mike and I created the payroll system we have and stuff like that. I brought on my nephew who went to law school, and he's really he helps us not so much on the legal side, but he's great with IT and he looks at our contracts. He does a lot. And Matt is just, you met Matt.
Matt was a big help in getting our interview set up here.
Yes. And Matt, I could
He's sharp
not,
as a whip.
it'd be, they say everybody's replaceable. Yes, that's true, but it'd be hard to replace Matt. It'd be really hard. He's just versatile in so many things. He really is. And I like to reward the people that, like Delane, you met. Delane is just an asset that this company took on. She's the one that got us on with one of the biggest hospital systems in the United States. And she said, "Oh, I can get us in there." I said, "Really? Everybody talks. Let's see you do it." And she did it. So she is just, she's excellent. She's a workhorse. I don't know if I can keep up with her.
That's terrific. I'm glad we had the opportunity to give a shout out to a couple of your valued team members there. We don't always take the time to do that on the show. It's a reminder to me to open that door.
Yeah, our staff, it took us a while to get what we have. I mean, and it's not just them, our entire staff right now, I think we found what we needed. When Mike and I left one of the attorneys that we were in business with this company, he was hiring everybody. The business was in his law office, so he had everybody devoted to him, the employees, and they wouldn't listen to anything Mike and I said. And it caused a lot of problems. So, we got him out of the company. And now it's just me and Mike. So the staff listens to us. And it just took us a while. We had to, we fired people that worked 2 days. And we said, "No, you're not going to make it. And but now, our staffing directors, our staffers, they're all excellent, in my opinion. I couldn't have a better staff right now. And I think that's going to help us reach that next level. Going from 30 employees to 100 employees is not that hard. We're roughly at 1,000 employees right now, and they're not all full time. But to go from 1,000 to 10,000, it gets a lot harder. And my CPA told me, he says, "Mark, right now is going to be the hardest time in your business career." And I said, "Why?" He says, "You're like a teenager. You're not a mom and pop operation anymore, but you're not one of the big boys. So you're stuck in the middle. Like when we try to get on with certain software companies to say, well, we really like to have 5,000 employees, and we don't have 5,000. Well, we're not interested in doing business with you. So we call another company. Oh, you got 1,000. Oh, that's too much. We can't handle that." So you're always fighting, trying to find that balance. So, what he said, you're like a teenager growing up. And now I understand what he meant.
So aside from finding the right software partner fits, as you think through sort of, I don't know, structurally, like what kind of changes do you think need to be thought about as you go through this next phase of growth? Because clearly, as you think about when you first started the business decades ago, right? And you're doing everything, you're putting your hands on everything, you're involved in every part of the business. It's much different now. You've had to remove yourself. You've had to put, layers in place. You've had to hire people. What do you think that evolution of that process looks like as you head into this next stage of growth?
Like I said, I think it looks good because of the simple fact that the staff that we have understand what we're trying to do, and they know the goals that we're trying to obtain and reach. They know how to do it, and they will not slack on their job. And I think that's going to be, that's why I put so much emphasis on promoting and giving credit to my staff, because that they're the ones that's going to get us there. It's not me. It's not Mike. It's all of us as a team, and we work well as a team together.
Mark, any books or mentors you want to call out that have been helpful to you?
Oh, I, I'm really, can't say I have. I don't read
Okay, fair enough.
surprisingly that much or anything. I
Yeah.
mean, um, I get on the internet and you get on the internet and you see all the, you can decipher these crazy people real fast. Um, but, to say, oh, look, I admire, Bill Gates or, which I do, don't get me wrong, because Bill Gates started Microsoft at the same time I got into the nursing business. And
Okay.
yeah, look where Bill Gates is at, and look where I'm at. Of course, it's a different business and everything, but you know, I, I just look. I lived in the housing projects when I was young. When I went to school, I went to a private school, um, and I paid my own tuition. My parents couldn't afford it. Um, I knew that I needed to work harder to achieve the goals that I wanted. And living in the housing projects, that was just it's just one of those things. My parents didn't make that much money, and I wanted out. You went to school, and if you raised your hand because you lived in the housing projects, you got free lunch. And so at the beginning of the year, they'd say, "Well, low income family or something." Never raised my hand. I'll pay for my lunch. I'm not getting it free.
Mm.
I was too embarrassed,
Hmm.
and that was just me. I'm not saying you have to be embarrassed because you lived in the housing projects or something like that. Look, everybody has it rough at one point in their life. Even the wealthiest people, they weren't born that way. Most of them weren't. And, my kids are going to, inherit everything I have, but I promise you one thing, they still going to work because I'm not just giving them something for nothing. If they're gonna inherit, what I have, and they think they're gonna sit back and drink, and none of my kids do all that, I'm gonna have some rules and stipulations on that inheritance.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just want them to be successful and be proud of what they do. Let it work for them, but I'm not gonna have them just sit back and do nothing.
They've got to
Just
find something that drives themselves,
yeah,
right? And you had that growing up in the projects. I don't want to be here. I want a different
right.
life for myself. You had that push, that drive. Somebody who got a chance to grow up in a different, more comfortable environment, right? It's a little more difficult for the parent to kind of instill that same sense of drive.
It is.
Any suggestions you would have for parents in that similar situation who are listening? How do you instill that sense of drive, that sense of go get it, like get up and make something
Yeah.
of yourself?
I think your children see it in you. They saw me getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They heard me leaving the house to go to the office, and they seen during Christmas Day I had to leave and go do stuff for staff a ship. So it's not so much me telling them. I think they saw everything I did and how hard I worked to get where I'm at today. So I really didn't have to tell them. They saw it, and they come to me, and none of my children are in business with me. um, I I can't say I would let them. My youngest daughter, she got her biology degree, graduated. Now she's going back to be a nurse. She goes, oh, they call me Pop. She goes, Pop, I want to work for your company. And the other day she says, I don't know if I want to work for your company. I said, well, that's a good idea. Get out, make it on your own, and when you're ready, you can come into the company. But I certainly wasn't gonna just hand over a multi-million-dollar business, my share, to one of my kids just because I became a nurse. That just wasn't going to happen. And my other children, one's a police officer. My daughter-in-law's a sheriff's department K-9 unit. My other son works in fraud prevention. Another son in IT. I mean, they're all doing well for themselves, and none of them are hurting. They all have their own houses. They live in well, and you know they're making it. And I think, like I said, it's nothing that I had to tell them
You
directly.
lived
It's
by
what they saw.
example from
Yeah,
I'm hearing you say.
yeah,
Yeah. They watched your life example. That's
yeah.
good.
And it wasn't fun sometimes. I mean, they knew when I missed one of their. We used to coach. My wife coached a lot of ice hockey in South Louisiana, believe it or not. And sometimes I wasn't at all their games, but they understood why. It wasn't because I was, playing golf or fishing or hunting or something like that. It was because I was working.
Yeah. Mark, I just have one more question for you. Before I do it, I want to do two things. First of all, for those listening today, if you like today's content, please hit the like, share, or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. Mark, I also want to let people know the best way to get in touch with you. What would that be?
And somebody needed to actually get in touch with me. I mean, they can call my cell phone direct. I'm not afraid to give it out. It's
You sure?
yeah, I'm sure. Like if it's a bad number, I'll block it.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with that. It's 337-351-4888.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, look, if crazy people are going to call me, I'll figure them out real fast. But
Fair
if I can
enough.
help somebody, I'm glad to help somebody. It's not a matter of, somebody has to call me just that is going to benefit me as well.
Mhm.
If I can help somebody become a better person, I'm more than willing to do that.
Where does that come from? That sense of wanting to help others?
I think my father, who was never around,
Mm.
my
Say
real
more about
father,
that. Yeah.
he died, and I still never shed a tear for him. My dog died. I cried for 3 months, and I didn't want to be like my father. My stepfather was wonderful. I mean, if I got it from anybody, it would have been my stepfather.
Okay.
But
He
my
lived the
father,
same way. He had the
yeah,
same kind of heart.
oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
my real father was just, he just didn't care about us. He had his own life. He disinherited us, everything. And I didn't need his money, but I would never do that to my kids.
Yeah.
And and so, and I want to help people because people are sometimes they don't know how to get out of a bad situation they're in, and they just need somebody who's looking at it from a different perspective. And if I can help them, I help them. Not saying I'm giving them all kind of money or anything like that. That's not how you help people, by giving them things.
Sometimes advice is worth a lot more than that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so yeah, but if somebody needs to talk to me, like I said, I have 5 children, 3 grandchildren. My wife and I, we certainly had our battles and growing up and everything, but I love my wife more each day,
That's
every
terrific.
day. And a lot of people say, "Wow, that's weird. What's weird about it?" We've been
It's the way
married,
it's supposed to be.
yeah, going on 48 years. And, I asked my wife, I said, why are you still with me? Because my wife probably looks in her 40s and she's 63 years old, if not late 30s. Okay. Look at me. I feel blessed to be married to her. And I said, why you stayed married to me? And she goes, well, I'm waiting for you to become rich and I'm very patient. How much money you need, baby? Tell me, because I think we're doing pretty good. We don't have any debt. Both of us could retire today with no problems. And she goes, well, I married you for your last name. I love your last name.
Pretty cool,
And,
man.
and that I truly believe. She loves my last name. I don't know which is hers now, And that's just,
Yeah.
we stuck it out, though. And that's the main thing.
Last question for you, Mark.
Sure.
How do you see your industry evolving in the next couple of years? What do you think the big changes are that are coming?
I don't see radical changes because this has been going on for so long. I think they're gonna start weeding out the smaller companies, and
Mm.
it's gonna be definitely more software driven. Um, I mean, we are software driven now with schedules, and we put out a schedule, and the nurse sees what shifts are open, and they can pick it and stuff. I don't see any drastic changes, but I do see the industry tightening up a little bit to weed out some of the mom and pops that just can't meet the standards that are out there today, and it's just for the protection of the patient.
Well, it sounds like that'll be good for Nurses Direct.
It will. It definitely
Yeah.
will be.
And for the patients as well.
Look, I certainly appreciate you invite Mike and myself onto your show, and that means a lot. I miss radio. Um, I'd go back in a New York second if somebody would.
Yeah. Any
I'd work for
plans?
free. I'd work for
Any
free.
thoughts on how to do that?
Well, I almost bought the radio station I worked for, and for
Okay.
years, and I signed all the non-disclosures, and I could actually afford it back, when I was going to buy it. And they had two main accounts that was supporting that station. I said, man, if these two accounts go away, I'm stuck with this debt. and I didn't. So I think I'm going to do something online. I have a dual residency. I have my domicile where I claim my residence is Gulf Breeze, Florida. So I have a house there, my driver's license, everything. I vote in Florida, everything. I'm working with the city to set up an online television / radio station, but online. And so I
Okay.
think I'm going to just have to get into it that way. And the city was really receptive because for some reason the city doesn't have their own website. And I said, look, let me do something and we can do interviews. And then when y'all need to get out something, they'll know where to go,
Yeah.
so they'll have a certain spot on the internet and to find out the information that y'all want to get to the citizens of the town.
Well, we're going to have to keep in touch. And when that happens, not if, but when that happens, you'll have to let me know. And we'll
Well,
have you
it
back on the
happens.
show, or we'll do some sort of a cross joint interview. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I certainly will let you know.
All right. Well, hey, Mark Savoie, I want to be the first to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Look, I enjoyed giving it, and hopefully somebody can learn from it. And again, I wish you all the success, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.